How is Aliens problematic? Well, I'll tell you. There is now a warning on Sky when Aliens goes on screen. Why? Because of the fact that there is a non-Hispanic actress playing an Hispanic character. So that is now carrying a warning. I'm sorry, but they're actors. Okay, I understand if you're going to make an offensive portrayal or a parody portrayal, but this is an actor playing a different nationality. And I didn't look at that character. I presume it's Vasquez is the character who is the Hispanic woman in it. And why does that need a warning? Genuinely, am I missing something here? Is it now racist to play a different nationality? So, for instance, I used to act a little bit. My agent always used to put me up for roles that were either Greek, or sometimes I might be put up for a Middle Eastern role or Italian and all those sorts of things, because I'm dark-haired, dark eyes, dark-featured, bit chunky, probably makes me Mediterranean. Well, sorry, am I only able now to play half Greek, half British roles? And if I do anything other than my own nationality, am I racist? I'm sorry, I think this is getting a bit ridiculous. Are we now going a bit far with this, or is it racist to play any nationality or any ethnicity that is not yours?
I think that we're not just going too far, we've gone too far. And, notwithstanding the reasons that all of this started in the first place, insofar as the tragic death of Mr. Floyd and so on, we have lurched very, very quickly from outrage and sympathy to tearing down remnants of our history, not just in this country, of course, but in particular in the US, and now to airbrushing and sanitizing art. And when I say art, we talk about movies, but Cristo, what's next? Do we send in a team of, woke sanitizers into the National Gallery and start taking down anything that perhaps was either painted by someone that knew a slave trader or is in some way disrespectful of men, women, the gay community, blacks, Chinese, and so on? It's gone too far.
I agree that we're having a debate about this stuff. I agree it's important that we do that. And I agree with those people that say we should be talking more about this in school, talking more about the more sinister parts of our history as well as the more triumphant parts of our history. I completely and 100% on board with that.
But Cristo, therein lies the point. The point is that if you sanitize everything so that it is airbrushed, whether it be statues or whether it be movies, and honestly, one of the films that you didn't mention in your intro just now was Aladdin. Aladdin, the cartoon, now has a warning on it that it might not be fully and properly representative of modern day values. I mean,
and that is because just so people know, that is because, and I think this is the reason that a couple of the non-white characters in the cartoon are voiced by white actors, and that is now seen as problematic.
Yeah, or it could be, I guess, and look, if we wanted to sit there picking holes in every particular film or song or picture in the National Gallery, as we've said, then we could. It could be because Aladdin is portrayed as poor, and the connotation, therefore, is that anyone with a brown skin is therefore poor. I mean, it could go as far as that, couldn't it?
Couldn't it? But again, do you know what is I feel could be happening here as well? Is that it's almost becoming insulting to non-white people. It's almost like, whilst I really welcome to hear from some non-white people that can explain it to me, but it's almost like we're having to say to people that they are, I don't know, I almost think that we are insulting those people who are intelligent enough and those people who are non-white who are intelligent enough to know that this was 40, 50, Aliens was 35 years ago.
It is patronising. And, of course, when you watch Trading Places, which was made in, 1983 or 1984, it's pretty clear, unless you're an amoeba, that as a consequence of it being made in 1984, go figure, the the tone of that movie, the subject of the movie, and what is said in it might not be represented insofar as now's values, so to speak.
What do you? Because I get there's the blackface scene. I mean, I saw that as ridiculous, and the makeup was so ridiculous when he did it that was the whole point. He wasn't actually.
But also Eddie Murphy, though, of course, he's the poor black man at the beginning, isn't he? So you've got the white guy, which is Dan Aykroyd, is the wealth trader, and they portray Eddie Murphy, because he's the black guy, as the one that, well, of course, this is the perception, which I don't agree with, but the perception being that because Eddie Murphy is black, he must be the vagrant. Now, I'm sure that didn't even, and I was going to say, it didn't even enter the writers' minds, but someone on the woke left would say, yes, but that's exactly the point. It's because it didn't enter their minds that we must do something about it.
Disagree completely. I think it was 100% at the forefront of their minds. The whole point of Trading Places is that, yes, the black character is a stereotype that Eddie Murphy plays of a vagrant who's trying to con people, and then, if you don't know the story of Trading Places, and then he climbs the ladder, and the point is it's a bet between the two people who own the trading firm that Dan Aykroyd works at, who is the white privileged person who works at the trading firm, or at the finance company. The two bosses, who are horrible and sinister, decide to boot him out and make him a tramp by framing him for a crime, and getting the black vagrant character, played hilariously by Eddie Murphy, putting him in that job to prove that actually someone who's taken from that situation and given the opportunity to be in a good job can actually prosper and thrive. So Eddie Murphy's character has the last laugh. The entire point of the movie is that it's that he's been the vagrant at the start.
But how far do we want to go? I think the brothers that are in the film, aren't they Jewish? So isn't that outrageous, inverted commas, that it's a parody almost, and therefore could be seen as, if you really wanted to stretch it, anti-Semitic. The issue that I also have is that we talked a lot about the Holocaust, and still talk about the Holocaust and lessons having to be learned from such things. And that's why, we still see on History Channel documentaries about the Second World War. Auschwitz is still open for people to go and see and absorb the absolute horror of the concentration camps. If we get rid of every symbol of our past, even if some of it is questionable, albeit some of it, I mean, like the removal of Gladstone's statue because his father made money from slave trading, I think is preposterous. But if we do go to such an extent as to airbrush, to whitewash history completely, what do my kids learn about what not to do as members of society in the future? Where are the lessons? Where are the lessons that we can learn as a society if we conveniently push under the carpet and we forget the horrors and the mistakes of our past and that of other societies?
Absolutely. And again, I just can't, I'm sorry to bang on about Trading Places, but if you take away the racial element and of the fact that it is a stereotype that is Eddie Murphy's character, that's the entire point of the movie. He's a stereotype of what the media and of what society expects a black person who's on their backside to be like, but he proves everyone wrong. He's smarter than all of them. He ends up at the end of the movie richer than the people who put him in that position. That's the entire point of the film. If you got rid of that, and there's no movie.
And I don't know if you saw today, the latest furore apparently is the English rugby song that's sung by the crowd, which is Sweet Chariot and so on.
Yeah.
Trevor Phillips, of all people, who used to be, I think, the chairman of the Racial Equality Board. Forgive me, it's probably not quite right, but I think that was roughly his role. Has actually tweeted to say, well, no, actually, that song was written after the Civil War and was often sung by slaves because it in some way represented them. So we've lurched so quickly in such a knee-jerk way to absolutely anything and everything that could in any way be offensive. And of course, at the moment it's race. Where is it next week? Is it things of a feminist nature? Would it be issues that relate to the disabled? Anything that could be slightly homophobic. Where does this stop?
Should I be laughing at David on Little Britain? I find that character hilarious. I find parodies of the gay community absolutely completely hilarious. I actually think sometimes those sorts of characters do us more good because it almost shows a a harmlessness that perhaps people don't think is there. But should I now be complaining about John Inman? Should I now be asking for, are you being served to be banned?
Isn't it interesting that it often isn't the so-called victims that are portrayed in these instances that get offended? It's the woke left that get offended on their behalf. I think John Cleese said something very, very interesting. I can't remember if it was the end of last week or the beginning of this week, where he said, comedy is offensive. Comedy is about making fun of people. That is what comedy is. So if we're not allowed to criticise, if we're not allowed to show differentiation in society, if we're not allowed to, in any way say slightly offensive things about people that aren't quite the same as everybody else, then there is actually no comedy. Yeah. So what we're heading towards here, Cristo, is no comedy.
Comedy is cruel. The whole point of comedy, I mean, you laugh at the person falling over. You laugh at the person that's tripped over and hurt themselves. Comedy is not kind. And okay, fine. I do believe that it is right to review some of the less sophisticated comedy. We don't need to hear N-word jokes from Bernard Manning. However, if you're going to start going after things like Gavin and Stacey, Fawlty Towers, those things that actually I think we can watch and we can enjoy on various different levels, there's a huge campaign to get rid of Gavin and Stacey now because of the episode where, and I don't know if you know the episode I'm talking about, but they refer to, it was the first episode of season 2, and the characters who are hilarious, Dawn and Pete, who are the two family friends, they've gone to a restaurant and they've picked up a swinger who happens to be a gentleman by the name of Seth, who's a black guy. And every time that they describe him as Seth, the black fella, and they do a thing round their face. Now, Dawn describes him as that, and then when Dawn describes him as Seth, the black fella, to Pam, and then Pam does that then to Nessa, and then Nessa describes him as that to Stacey, and then Stacey describes him like that to Gavin, and then Gavin describes him like that to Mick. So firstly, that's the joke, but secondly, these ridiculous descriptions like Big Fat Sue, Fat No More Pat, they're completely literal, and that's where the comedy comes from. So you can't just look at Seth the black fella and say, right, that's an isolated incident. It's part of a wider joke in the series.
And comedy is either fiction, it's stories, and kind of, therefore it's not necessarily real, or it's observational, which is actually, therefore, the reason you laugh is because actually it triggers something familiar in your mind. Have you seen that film with Ricky Gervais? I think it's called The Invention of Lying.
Yes.
Have you ever seen it?
Yes, I watched it quite recently, actually.
Well, I think in a few weeks' time that's where we'll be. Where the media, newspapers, radio, TV, art galleries, and so on, perhaps we'll all just have to be very straight-faced, not be able to say anything that is remotely left or right of field, and that will be society, will it? Well, no, no, please, for goodness sake. And I think your point earlier, Cristo, in terms of we have intelligence, we don't need to be told what to say, and we certainly don't need to be told what to think. I know George Orwell's pretty topical at the moment because, again, his father apparently earned reparations as a slave trader as a consequence of slavery being abolished in this country. Now he's apparently a pariah. But we are heading towards an Orwellian society.
My taxi, sorry to jump in, but just on that point about reparations, on my way,
it was the slave traders that got the reparations, not the slaves.
Yeah, absolutely. But on my way in to work a couple of nights ago, and okay, this person is clearly not representative of the entire black community, but I had a really great conversation with my driver, my Nigerian driver, black guy called Matthew, on the way in, and so I was having a really long chat with him about all of this, and he was saying, and again, this is just to show that there are different perspectives out there, perhaps from the alleged victims of all of this. He was saying, I'm sick of hearing about reparations, because to him, and how they are taught in Nigeria about this, he says, it was brilliant, because what it was showing was that the British government was prepared to take taxpayers' money and pay people to get rid of slavery. And he says, and so that's how it's framed among him and some people in Nigeria, that they don't say, oh my God, it's absolutely terrible. I mean, it is terrible, of course, that the slave owners got reparations and the slaves didn't. Let's make that clear. But the point I'm making is that he sees it as the British government putting their hand in their pocket to free slaves, and that William Wilberforce was a big part of that, and that isn't spoken about enough. And this was a black fella from Nigeria telling me this.
And of course, if we want to go to extremes, that apparently was the biggest bailout in British history from the taxpayer up until 2008-9, of course, when we had the financial crisis here. We have all been paying, all of us, into that pot to repay. I think it's the equivalent of something like £17 billion in today's money. So therefore, we're all kind of culpable.
And had they not have done that, there would not have been slaves freed. So yes, I absolutely get it's repugnant that slaves didn't get compensated and slave owners did, but it isn't as clear cut as people make out that it is, and it isn't seen. Picking up on your point, you're quite right. I think sometimes some of the alleged victims of some of this discrimination, persecution, however you want to describe it, they themselves can see the bigger picture and can see how things are, and they don't need things banned or things like that. I think we're suffering from a really, really big amount of guilt and a bit of an identity crisis, and I just don't know why we can't perhaps be more like Germany. I was watching something online the other day about how in Germany they are taught very, very, very comprehensively about their role in the Second World War and the atrocities that they carried out in the Second World War. But it's also
now become embedded, hasn't it, in their culture?
Absolutely, but
it's a given apology.
But it's done in a way that is, look at what your generations above you did. Not you need to feel guilty, not that it's your fault that this happened, but look at what happened before you and learn for the future. And my worry is we're not acting like this in this country. We're not talking about how we're going to go forward. All we're doing is beating ourselves up over the head about the past, and people who weren't even born when any of this happened are trying to blame each other, and that's not going to be the way in which we can heal and go forward. And I think that's more important than anything.
Yeah, and I think what doesn't help, I see people as people. So, I don't see colour. I see a person as a person. The more we keep talking about division, which is exactly what has now been accentuated and polarised over the last 3 or 4 weeks, then I think the more protracted and prolonged this whole racial divide becomes, because we're talking about that division rather than just, getting on. And look, from the point of view of, do 99%, God, I hope this is true, 99% of the population of this country, 99% of the white population of this country regret that past and history. And if they could apologise for it on the basis that they were somehow actually responsible as individuals for it, which of course someone of my age and your age is not, of course we would. But we can't keep banging on about it and victimising ourselves and persecuting, sanitising and clinicising society till the cows come home. It's not going to help.
Well, you're right, and I think that, and this isn't about, rolling our eyes, we're sick of hearing about it. It's about what's going to help. I think it's a really important thing you ended on. It's not going to help. And actually, what do people want? Do people want us all banging, completely berating ourselves and making ourselves feel guilty and terrible about everything forever? Or are we going to try and actually come up with some solutions as to how we can sort this out going forward? Now, if those solutions involve teaching more history in school, teaching more about our bad things that we did as well as the good things, a more balanced approach to our history in the past so that we can go forward, I'm all for that. But if you're telling me that we've got to erase it all and we've got to be treated like morons when it comes to watching simple films on TV, then I'm sorry, I don't think that's going to solve anything. In actual fact, I think it might make things worse.